The problem of evil, where it comes from, and what we can do about it, if anything, is a question that scholars of the religious sort and philosophers have wrestled with for as long as there have been religious scholars and philosophers. As humans, we want to understand why bad things happen, and we want to know how we can make it stop. The Buddha struggled with this question 2,600 years ago. He was raised in a palace where he had experienced none of the suffering of life. However, one day, when he left the palace against his father's wishes, he saw a man dying in the street. He saw a starving man, a sick man, and he was so taken aback by these visions that he went upon a spiritual quest, taking a vow that he would not stop until he found a way to end all sorrow. So, what is the root of all evil according to Buddhism? Buddha, in his wisdom, worked backwards and traced evil to three sources, three poisons, as he called them: greed, anger, and ignorance. All suffering, all bad things done by people can be traced to either one or a combination of greed, anger, and ignorance. And one fun thought experiment, if you really want to put Buddhism to the test, which you should, is to think of all the problems we experience in the world and try to find one that cannot be traced back to greed, anger, ignorance, or some combination of the three. For example, we might ask, why are there so many hungry people in the world? The answer to that question is greed. It turns out there's plenty of food in the world. We're producing more now than we ever have in the history of human life on the planet. However, capitalism, as we have it today, works on the concept of scarcity. There have to be some people who don't have enough food to eat so that the rest of us will pay higher prices for it. If everyone gets food, well, how will they make money? So, greed is the reason that there are so many hungry people in the world. Now, we might say, well, isn't that a little bit pessimistic, a little nihilistic to say that human beings are the source of all evil in the world, that it's our greed, our anger, our ignorance that's causing all the problems? And yes, it does look bad, but there is a bright side. You see, if human beings are the cause of human suffering, then human beings can also be the cure. We got ourselves into this mess. We can get ourselves out. But how do we do that? Well, simply put, if greed, anger, and ignorance in our mind is the reason there is so much evil in the world, then removing greed, removing anger, removing ignorance from our minds is the way to remove evil from the world. And how do we do this? Well, I wish there was a magic formula or a secret handshake I could give you, but it's a little bit more involved than that. The way we do this is through Buddhist training. Through the sutra study, through the prostrations, through the meditation, difficult though it may be, it has an important purpose. It's not just something we do because, well, the teacher told us to. We are working for the betterment of all sentient beings. Every time we sit on the cushion, every time we bow in front of our altar, every time we open up a Dharma book, we are doing it for ourselves, yes, but we're also doing it for everyone else. How can I say this? Because we are interconnected and interpenetrated with all living things. Thus, when we remove the greed, anger, and ignorance from our own mind, we also remove it from the collective mind of all sentient beings. When we reduce and remove suffering from our own life, we reduce and remove suffering from the lives of others. One way we could think about this is, if you've ever been on an airplane, one thing they always tell you in the pre-flight speech is, if the plane starts to go down, you put on your own oxygen mask before you help the person next to you. Now, you don't do this out of a sense of self-preservation per se. You do it from an understanding that if you can't breathe, and you're trying to help the person next to you, and you pass out from lack of oxygen, well, now not only are you having problems, but you're also unable to help the next person. The best thing you can do in that situation, if you want to help the people around you, is to help yourself first. Similarly, if we want to remove evil from the world, remove suffering from the world, we first must remove evil and suffering from our own lives. If we want to remove the poisons of greed, anger, and ignorance from our politics, from our schools, from our work, we must remove them from our own minds. Thus, when we take the Bodhisattva vow and say that we vow to save all sentient beings are numberless, we vow to save them all, we enact that vow, we fulfill that vow each time we do our daily practice. By understanding the root of all evil, which is greed, anger, and ignorance, and by extension the minds, which contain greed, anger, and ignorance, we now have the solution, the cure to the problem. We train our minds, we train the world. We heal ourselves, we heal the world. In this way, Buddhist training isn't just something we do, it's one of the most life-affirming, most satisfying things we can do in our day. Not just on the cushion, but off the cushion as well. Because Buddhism is our entire lives if we're doing it correctly. When we prepare food for a loved one, when we care for our pets, when we smile and wave at our next door neighbor, what we are doing is instilling more kindness and compassion into the collective mind of the world. And in doing that, we weaken the hold of the three poisons. A smile and a wave weakens anger. The giving of food to a loved one weakens greed. The "I'm sorry" if we've made a mistake weakens anger, and as we weaken the hold of these poisons on our minds and the minds of others, the temperature of the collective world goes down. The volume gets a little bit lower. Life gets a little bit better. So if we're ever feeling overwhelmed by all of the problems that we see and experience, if it all just seems a little bit too much to bear, remember, we don't have to solve every problem. We just have to solve the problem in front of us. And if we do that little bit, if we remove that little bit of greed, that little bit of anger, that little bit of ignorance from the world, we have made the life better, not just for ourselves, but for everyone around us as well. Amitabha.